Hey there, Hang Up listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about a story coming up a little later. It's from one of our partners, SAP. Is your business reaching an exciting turning point? Are you ready to seize the moment for growth? Well, when you're facing tough decisions, SAP can help you be ready for anything that happens next. To learn more, head to sap.com/be-ready and stick around to hear how the president of an esports league seized the moment.
This episode is brought to you by Dave, a banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. Because when you download Dave, you could get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's part of Dave's Extra Cash account. Advance the money you need with no interest and then settle up later. Download Dave today at dave.com/Spotify. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC.
The following podcast includes explicit language, including, well, you'll just have to wait and see. Hi, I'm Stefan Fatsis, and this is Slate's sports podcast, Hang Up and Listen, for the week of September 25th, 2023. On this week's show, Spencer Hall breaks down a crazy Saturday in college football that included the humbling of Coach Prime and two 40-something current coaches beefing with two 80-something former coaches. Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer explains baseball's pretty wild card races, the greatness of Ronald Acuna Jr., and the future of Shohei Ohtani. And finally, Nadira Goffe of Slate and Dan McQuade of Defector join to discuss a new documentary about Philadelphia Eagles center Jason Kelce and his brother Travis's new pal, Taylor Swift. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm the author of the books Word Freak, A Few Seconds of Panic, and Wild and Outside. I also once broke the news that Wall Street junk bond king Michael Milken would plead guilty to securities and tax crimes. Josh Levine is off this week, but you can listen to him on the series of which he is the editorial director, One a Year. The new season, all about 1955, is out now. If you haven't heard Josh's episode about the Cannon Street All-Stars, the all-black Little League team that white teams wouldn't play, you should do that. The most recent episode is about, and I quote, the communist hunting housewives who spawned a far-right conspiracy theory about an American gulag. Slate staff writer Joel Anderson, the host most recently of Slow Burn Season 8, Becoming Justice Thomas, also is away this week, which leaves me and our guests trying to fill the huge Josh-Joel void. In our bonus segment for Slate Plus members, Nadira Goffe and Dan McQuade will stick around to talk some more about Tay-Tay and Philly sports movies. To hear that conversation, you have to be a Slate Plus member. As a member, you get bonus segments on this and other Slate shows, ad-free listening for all Slate podcasts, and you get to support us, which should make you feel good. It makes us feel good. Slate.com/hangup+ to sign up. That's slate.com/hangup+.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you're driving, cooking, or doing laundry, Progressive knows the podcasts you listen to go best when they're bundled with another activity. Much like how their Progressive home and auto policies go best when they're bundled. Having these two policies together makes taking care of your insurance easier and can help you save too. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. That's a whole lot of savings and protection for your favorite podcast listening activities, like going on a road trip, cooking dinner, and even hitting the home gym. Yep, your home and your car are even easier to protect when you bundle your insurance together. Find your perfect combo. Get a home and car insurance quote at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary.
This podcast is brought to you by Slate Studios and SAP. How do you know when to seize the moment for growth? When your opportunity arrives, you need to be ready. From expanding into new markets to hiring, business leaders face so many tough decisions.
My name is Brendan Donahue, president of the NBA 2K League. The NBA 2K League is a professional esport run by the NBA and 2K, where we take 30 million people who play the game of NBA 2K and we find the best 125 in the world to compete in our league.
In March of 2020, the start of the pandemic spurred the league to take steps it never imagined. And with SAP tools, they knew they were ready.
We could have postponed our season like a lot of other sports leagues did. We decided to seize the moment. We created a competition that could be done virtually. We had the NBA 2K League on major sports networks for 17 weeks. That moment gave us a chance to talk to a mass audience across the world. So the majority of our fans, less than 1%, will ever step foot in an NBA arena to watch a game live. But you have this significant fandom and excitement for the game, and so that's really where we think we play a role. Our first season, we had 650,000 people watch our finals in season 1. Now our finals this past year, we had 2.2 million people watching.
NBA 2K League seized the moment for growth. Will you? Head to sap.com/be-ready to learn more.
Deion Sanders and his Colorado Buffaloes travel to Oregon on Saturday for their what's left of the Pac-12 conference regular season opener. In the run-up to the game, Sanders seemed less chatty than before the Buffs shock the world wins over TCU, Nebraska, and Colorado State. Maybe that's because he knew his team didn't stand a realistic chance against the 10th-ranked Ducks. Oregon head coach Dan Lanning, on the other hand, was so confident that he let ABC's cameras into the locker room to record his run-through-a-brick-wall pregame speech. Let's listen.
You top of your helmet, right? Every moment. The Cinderella story is over, man. Right? They're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins. There's a difference, right? There's a difference, right? This game ain't going to be played in Hollywood, it's going to be played on the grass, right? It's going to be played on the grass.
Lanning went on to say, this ain't no party, this ain't no disco, this ain't no fooling around, no time for dancing or lovey-dovey. I ain't got time for that now. Joining me now to discuss this game and others on a weekend that featured 6 ranked versus ranked and 7 unbeaten versus unbeaten games, it's Spencer Hall. He's a co-host of the Shutdown Fullcast podcast, a panelist on the SEC Network's Thinking Out Loud, a producer of the storytelling portal Channel 6, and so much more. Spencer, welcome back to the show.
I appreciate the reference because college football will refuse to make sense and will happily stop making sense.
All right, let's start with that ass-kicking in Eugene. Oregon ran a fake punt from its own 17-yard line in the first quarter, led 35-0 at the half, went for it on 4th and goal from the 1 in the third quarter, and then stopped trying. It ended 42-6. We were prepared for a battle. It didn't end up being a battle, Lanning said after the game. Ouch. Deion Sanders, to his credit, took the trash talk well. Take shots. They won.
True. And you get to talk it, a thing that happened a couple of different times in a couple of different spots in college football this past weekend. But for anyone who I think had been watching the Colorado bubble, this was not a surprise because everyone knew they had no fat guys. You need athletic fat guys. You need linemen, defensive and offensive, to make this thing go. Deion was able to flip a lot through the portal, a lot. But it takes time to sort of coalesce the larger talents around each other to get an offensive line that can get real push and to get a defensive line that's able to disrupt whatever they're trying to do on offense. And Colorado simply doesn't have those. They were able to get a lot of skilled players. They were able to plug and play Shedeur Sanders in an attack that has been extremely productive against bad defenses. And it's exciting. It's exciting when new things happen. It's exciting when you have a coach like Deion Sanders who is good at his job. Like if you can get one clarion point through all of the madness, and this is a fully broken-brained discourse at this point among people who are watching college football because everything about the Deion experiment breaks a certain type of brain in ways that are very obvious to see. But you need to know the dude's pretty good at his job. And I think pretty good is fair. This is not, look at Ohio State. Ohio State played Notre Dame and they had trouble getting a yard. That is historically one of the 2 or 3 best programs in the nation every single year, and they didn't have enough offensive linemen to get a yard at certain times in that game. Notre Dame had to gift them an empty space in order to do that. I was not surprised at the result. In fact, I was actually kind of surprised that it wasn't worse given how it went in the first quarter. because they, on that first drive, if you want to know what to look in for a blowout when you go, hey, is this going to be a blowout? Was anybody breathing hard on the offense on the first drive? No one was breaking a sweat, and they were pulling off 6, 7, 8 yards at a time. It wasn't big plays, but it was easy. And when you hit the easy button on the first drive, it's going to get bad fast.
Well, you could see, Bo Nix is a real quarterback too. And the difference in talent was so apparent from that first drive and throughout the first half. I mean, it was effortless almost. And, I have to think that Deion, who's incredibly self-aware, and it seems weird to say that, but I think that he is. I mean, I think Sanders knows his limitations. He not only recruited well in the portal through his charismatic, personality, he also hired an incredibly good coaching staff to get them as far as he's managed to get them. This was a 1-11 team last year, as we've discussed before on this show. But he must know that, look, we're not making the playoff here. He knows what the limitations are. And he also knows how to manipulate everything too, obviously. He's a master of media. And, Jay Caspian-Kang tweeted what I thought was a really perceptive thing about Deion, which was, he said, respect to Prime for understanding the first rule of content. Drop all your takes early because people aren't going to pay attention all that long. But if you entertain them at the start, they'll just associate you with that forever, even if you're losing by 40 to Oregon. I don't think that Colorado can finish 3-9 and people will still say nice things about how successful they've been. But if they go 7-5, 8-4, and play in some lesser bowl game, it'll be a success.
They've already, you need to understand, this is already a success. This is already a success in terms of the Colorado brand. So we're talking about somebody who is going to get generational results there for Colorado football already. And that's before he gets a second round of recruiting. So that's incredible to me. Dan Lanning did the same.
Yep.
It's my favorite part. Dan Lanning had the great irony of delivering what we would call a fire take in the locker room, saying that they were playing for, actual football for wins, not for clicks. Doing that in front of every camera that he had turned on him in the locker room. Prime professional wrestling bit. Absolutely professional. Like the person standing in the middle of the ring full of people going, I do this for me, not for you, which is why I want to make sure the camera's pointed right at me. So I love it. I love the showmanship on both sides. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. This is, talk it. Like, Dan Lanning has been recruiting his ass off at Oregon and isn't there to lose, and went and got a quarterback most people had assumed had kind of, peaked or plateaued, and has turned him into not only one of the Pac-12's best quarterbacks, but one of the best ones in the nation. If you told me Bo Nix was going to be a legitimate Heisman contender at Oregon in the year 2023, back in 2020, I would have slapped you. I would have completely dismissed the idea out of hand. But they've done it. And more importantly, they're significantly better along both lines. They're a big, mean, physical team. They ran a fake punt with a lineman. They ran a fake punt with a dude who qualifies as heavy baggage on most airlines. That is outstanding work on his part. So, don't sleep on that part of the story here either. Yeah, this is the worst team that Deion will field at Colorado. I think Oregon could say the same thing because they're only going to get better as well.
You mentioned Ohio State and Notre Dame. That game ended with Notre Dame fielding 10 players for the last two plays of the game, the last play of which was Ohio State's winning touchdown with no time left on the clock. Football, I am told, Spencer, you're allowed to have 11 players on the field. Is that right?
I'd have to double check, but most plays, they seem to get away with having 11 on the field. And that is the kind of mistake that unravels what had been for the previous 58 minutes of the game, had been a beautiful performance by Notre Dame. They'd done everything they'd wanted to do. They'd ground the gears down. They'd slowed that game to a crawl. They'd held Marvin Harrison Jr., the best wide receiver in football, in my opinion. They'd held him to relatively minor contributions with some outstanding defense and a whole lot of attention. And it was all undone with a series of simple mistakes. There's a bad play on that goal line stand, or lack of a goal line stand, in terms of forgetting to put 11 people on the field. That's bad. So in terms of unraveling every good thing you did in the last, minute or two of that game, Notre Dame did it. Notre Dame did it, and they let Ohio State off the hook, which makes it even funnier that Ryan Day manages to cut his own promo after the game on Lou Holtz and anyone who managed to doubt Ohio State by saying, oh, we've only played one bad half. I could probably point to 2 bad halves there, Ryan, over the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, let's listen to Ryan Day after the game because, I mentioned in the intro, we had 2 coaches going after old former coaches who talk on television for a living now. This was the first one.
Coach, you knew this one wasn't going to be easy, but it came down to the wire. And what can you say about the performance from your quarterback, Kyle McQuade, to finish that drive?
Toughness, that's it. Physicality, across the board, finish it off, having guts. I'd like to know where Lou Holtz is right now. What he said about our team, I cannot believe. This is a tough team right here. We're proud to be from Ohio, and it's always been Ohio against the world, and it'll continue to be Ohio against the world. But I'll tell you what, I love those kids, and we got a tough team.
They just don't win in Ohio. They're just the plucky bunch of underdogs. It's hard to recruit there to Ohio State, isn't it?
This is one of my favorite tropes.
Yeah,
is the underdog Ohio, the one that's produced like more presidents in the history of the United States than like almost any other state, and managed to be the center of like American industrialization and production, and has the largest state university known to God or man. So it's plucky underdog Ohio State. Sure, buddy. I didn't quite buy the promo. I don't. I love that he gets the chance to get it off. As a connoisseur of these kind of things, it's C tier, and it has to do nothing. It's nothing to do with the material. It's the delivery. Ryan Day is just not a promo guy. Yeah. I know he felt it deeply. I know he did. I just don't think, again, to go back to wrestling, mic work is not his strong suit. All right. Beating teams that put 10 defenders on the field when you have 11 guys on offense, that is definitely a strength of theirs. If by charges, I mean this, that Ryan Day in his time at Ohio State has done a great job recruiting. He's done a great job developing an offense. The defense has come along, but when push comes to shove, they can be shoved. I think that's dependent, by the way, largely and almost entirely on the Michigan games, that they've lost 2 games. 2 games. That's it. 2 games to Michigan back to back. And that's been enough to sort of make this label stick. So I don't know if bowling somebody over with a man advantage necessarily helps you beat that claim. I know what it does do, which is that this team now has a proven record of winning wild ones. If you can win a wild one, if you can win an ugly one, if you win a close one, I have faith in you as a football team. If you really don't care how it looks and you're able to do this and you weren't shook at the end, that makes you pretty tough. Like I'll say, yeah, mentally pretty tough. Do I still think you can get a yard against a good defense? I want to see it with 11 on 11, not when the other team has made a mistake of basic arithmetic. Take that, Notre Dame, in your academic rankings. 10 is not 11.
The other part about Ryan Day's little post-game on-field speechifying was that, come on, like the whole going after Lou Holtz. I mean, Lou Holtz, in addition to...
He's always going to pick Notre Dame.
He's always going to pick. He's former Notre Dame coach. He's also like 100 years old, and he's like not a particularly likable human being at this point.
Not at all. Maybe never was.
Yeah.
Let's just go. Let's revise that history a little bit. Lou Holtz is the kind of guy who's definitely going to call you soft because you're not Lou Holtz, right? Because we all know real toughness is getting every program you ever coached on probation and then leaving. That's real toughness right there. Yeah, yelling at Lou's fun, and yelling at Lou feels good. It feels good even for the uninterested observer. But man, Lou's always going to pick Notre Dame. He also coached at Ohio State, something he said in those remarks, by the way. He was the defensive coordinator under Woody Hayes. And Lou did have one of the best lines I've ever heard, which he probably didn't actually say. He probably just thought it up after, right? But he did have one of the best lines ever, which is when they were playing USC and O.J. Simpson scored like a 76-yarder on him, like just ripped off a 76-yard run for a touchdown. Woody Hayes storms over him on storm line and goes, "What's he doing going 76 yards through my defense?" And Lou goes, "Well, he couldn't go any farther than that. Couldn't go 77. And, the end zone, like the goal line's right there. That's why he went that far, Coach."
The other coach that yelled at an old man over the weekend was Jake Dickert of Washington State after they beat Oregon State 38-35. Washington State, Oregon State, of course, the last 2 Pac-12 teams standing. Lee Corso on ESPN Game Day apparently said he made some terrible joke about how no one wants us bowl. This was the no one wants us bowl. Again, going after old guys, I don't quite see the motivational value here, but
I feel a little bit better than that.
Coaches, you feel a little bit better about this one?
I do, because Washington State's punching up. They really are,
yeah.
Because they have been one of the odd men out in realignment. They are always the odd man, because Pullman's odd, and Washington State is an odd program. It's a place that's had to do odd things to survive. You know, they were the original let's go spread and get a quarterback and play some bizarre, charismatic, high-octane football before most teams got on board with that package. They are the team that, everyone else agonized over it. They jumped in feet first with hiring Mike Leach. Like, they're weird. They're weird. And they are in a point now where, the future is still very much in the air. So, yeah, go ahead, talk it, man. Go ahead. If the only time game day pays attention to you is to say stuff like that, and you end up winning arguably the most exciting game of the weekend, at least the most dynamic game. I don't know if you saw play one, Cam Ward has been my nominee for most likely to be nicknamed Crazy Legs in 1942. Like the kind of quarterback where you go, man, it's a ride, and we're all on it with him. He's very much one of those quarterbacks. First play of the game, he uncorks like a 70-yarder. Just a bomb. And that's how you knew. You're like, okay, this game's going to be great. Like, this is how it's going to go. This is the tempo we're playing at. And they end up winning. And they're going to continue winning because they do happen to be a really, really good football team. And by talking this kind of mess, he's motivating his team. That's it. You got to remember, coaches are always talking to their team. Even when they're talking to you, they're talking to their team. And even when they're talking to their wives, they're talking to their team. And if they're talking to their kids in their head, that's the team too. So like, that's exactly what Dickert's doing here. I fully support it. Also, great delivery too. Great delivery.
Because the facts say people watch the Cougs, and the people watch the Cougs more than every team that's left over in the Big 12. Okay, so Coach Corso, he's at the point now where they give him the sheet and he reads off of it and they try to make a joke, but it didn't even.
Great delivery. Little mean. I mean, Corso's at the point now where they give him the sheet and he tries to make a joke and it doesn't even make sense. He's an old man. I mean, cut Lee a break. Flip side, he did the better point that I thought he made was when he went into I'd love to have a conversation with Coach Corso about XYZ. It was about breaking up the Pac-12. And he said, I'd love to have a conversation about how he thinks student athletes and mental health and flying them all over the country is a positive thing.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I am a contributor to ESPN, so let's go ahead and get that out there. But that doesn't really affect what I'm going to say about this, which is I think they could have that conversation. Like, why not? Sure. Lee coached Indiana. Like, I don't think there's if anyone understands institutional struggle, it should be the guy who not only coached Indiana, but coached Florida State when they were in the wilderness, when they were on the come up before Bobby Bowden turned them into a mega power. So yeah, like a lot of these things when we go, okay, we're talking about larger issues here. I'm always like, well, that is true. And the influence of television money, ESPN and Fox's money, is largely unaccounted for in the sphere in terms of how it has moved around actual geographical assets into a map-free, geography-free television product that ultimately will serve nobody. Remember, the dream of capital is to have business without people. That's it. And then the more we can eliminate people, the better. And that's what TV money is pushing for. If we can get brands without the cities, if we can get events without worrying about the travel, that's fine. They're just going to drive after the dollar. And that's no different in college football. There needs to be a conversation between two people as well about this, because they can work that out. The larger thing we can't work out is, at what point do we manage to accommodate people into the sport and to account for their needs? That's really it. And I say, like, college football in particular has a problem with this because at the moment they're not considered employees. They're not. That's going to stop because the Supreme Court's already basically invited the easy pick six. Like, they've already said, please, someone challenge this so we can continue to talk about the absolute sham of a business model amateurism operates under.
Spencer Hall, Shutdown Fullcast Podcast, SEC Network, ESPN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Spencer, always a pleasure. Thanks, man.
Likewise.
Up next, Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer joins to discuss Major League Baseball's wild card races.
At the end of your first year, Discover credit cards automatically double all the cash back you've earned. That's right. Everything you earned doubled. All the cash back from eating at your favorite soup dumpling restaurant doubled. All the cash back from that trip where you sort of learned to snowboard also doubled. And the best part, you don't have to do anything ridiculous to get it. Nope, Discover does it automatically. Seriously though, see terms and check out for yourself at discover.com/match.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverage you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies, all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
7 days remain in the Major League Baseball regular season. 6 teams have clinched playoff berths. 11 teams remain, mathematically anyway, alive for the remaining 6 spots. I hope as many of them as the schedule allows finish with the same record, and that playoff spots are determined by tiebreaker number 5, last half of intra-league games +1, leading to much caterwauling about Major League Baseball eliminating game 163s with playoff expansion last year. Our friend Ben Lindbergh is here now. He's a senior editor at The Ringer, where he writes a lot about Star Wars these days, the co-host of the long-running baseball podcast Effectively Wild, and the co-author of The Only Rule Is It Has to Work and The MVP Machine. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Stefan, and I'm with you. There are some rules changes that I've conceded defeat on, that I've reached the resignation acceptance phase, like the zombie runner. I don't think we're getting rid of it, except in the postseason when it goes away, as MLB acknowledges that it's a farce and it makes a mockery of the game. But I'm with you on the tiebreakers. I'm sad that we no longer have tiebreaker games, and so I'm rooting for some apocalyptic, catastrophic scenario where everyone ties, and it's exposed just how unsatisfying it would be to decide these division races and wildcard races on something other than head-to-head games to hash it out at the end.
I mean, there are so many good examples of game 163 being amazing, or 165 going back even farther, 51 Giants-Dodgers, 78 Yankees-Red Sox. I mean, these are iconic moments in baseball history. Why would you not want to encourage that?
Yeah, I'm with you. It's something that set baseball apart. There are so many great memories. It's more complicated to keep track of who holds the tiebreaker over who else and what is that even decided on. And really, you're just talking about one extra day or two. They did away with the tiebreaker games because they wanted to expand the playoff field and have more playoff games, and didn't want the postseason to stretch deeper into November, which I understand. But really, it's just a day or two, and it's not even every year. So for me, it would be well worthwhile.
All right, Orioles, Rays, Twins, Braves, Brewers, Dodgers, all in the playoffs. As I said, too many teams to name, still trying to wild card. But these are good races. And realistically, in the American League, Rangers, Blue Jays, Astros, Mariners are alive for 3 spots. In the NL, Phillies, Diamondbacks, Cubs, Marlins, Cincinnati kind of have shots for 3 spots also. Why have we seen such sort of parity down the stretch with all of these teams?
Yeah, it seemed like we were sort of moving past the super team era that we've been in for the past several seasons, where you'd have teams that were just leaps and bounds better than everyone else. You still have Atlanta, the best team in baseball, and we can talk about them. But the highs are a little less high than they've been. The Dodgers will probably win 100 games, but they won't win, 111 or something like that. And the Astros are still sort of trying to just slip into the playoffs here. They're not the overpowering Astros that we've known. So there's a little less overwhelming team talent in baseball these days than there has been over the past several seasons. And I think that's a good thing. And part of the rationale for expanding the playoffs, ostensibly at least, other than the fact that you just want more games to sell to TV networks in October, is that you would have meaningful races down the stretch and that more teams would be in it. And at least this year, that is proving to be the case. So it's really coming down to the wire here in the AL West, and then relatedly in the AL wildcard race, and of course in the NL wildcard race. And granted, some of the teams that are vying for those last playoff spots are not great teams, but they are similarly mediocre. And so that at least is providing some pretty compelling races.
On the non-mediocre front, the Braves have had just an unbelievable offensive performance this season. Jason Stark in The Athletic put together, as he always does, a long list of statistics that basically argue that the 2023 Atlanta Braves are the 1927 New York Yankees, or better.
Yeah, you can make a pretty good case. If you just look at WRC plus, weighted runs created plus, which is just sort of your holistic everything in one number measure where 100 is average. The Braves are at 124, so they're 24% better than the league this year. The 1927 Murderers Row Yankees were 125, so essentially the same. And it's these Braves and the Astros of a few years ago when they were really overpowering. They were at 124, and then you had other Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig Yankees teams in the mix there. So they are right in the running for best offense ever. They already have hit the most home runs in National League history. They are within range of having the most home runs of any AL or NL team, which is pretty impressive because this year is not the most extreme home run rate year. The ball has been deadened a bit relative to where it was a few years ago. So it's actually saying something when you set a home run record these days. So top to bottom, that lineup is pretty overpowering.
They're going to be the first team in history probably to hit 300 home runs and steal at least 100 bases. They're going to have a team slugging percentage potentially of 500, which is crazy. No team ever has done that. And leading the way, you mentioned the home runs, Matt Olson has more than 50 in a year where nobody's got a ton of home runs. Certainly not like last year when Aaron Judge broke the American League. But Ronald Acuna Jr. is the superstar of this team. He joined the 40-40 club, 40 homers, 40 steals, except that it's going to be like 70 steals and 40 homers.
Yeah, that's one of the fun races to follow down the stretch here in this final week too, the NL MVP race, because you have Acuna, who is sort of the presumptive favorite all season long, but Mookie Betts is outstripping him, at least by some wins above replacement measurements. He's great at defense, which is not Acuna's strength. And then former Brave Freddie Freeman is also in the running there, trying to have a 60-double season. Acuna is just incredible, though. 40 homers going for a 40-70 season. And granted, obviously it's been made a little bit easier to steal bases this year with the rules changes that have promoted steals. But even so, he is lapping the league in this category. So it's not like everyone is doing this. He is still very much an outlier here. And it's so unusual to see someone with that kind of power, even if they have that sort of speed, to utilize it this way, because how he's done it, he's not the fastest guy in baseball, but he's been incredibly aggressive when it comes to stealing anytime he has a chance. Anytime he's been on base, he's going. And that's rare when you have a guy who's also hitting 40 homers, because players, not only do they tend to slow down a little bit as they get older, but if they're big power threats, often they tend to dial it back a bit because they think, hey, if I have a slide here, I break a pinky, I'm done, I'm out, I'm going to hurt my team more if I actually go for it. And no, he's saying, to hell with it. Like, we're just going to go. I think he's just so happy to be back and healthy, and his knees are fine, and he is taking full advantage of the rules changes.
Yeah, and he stole bases before in his career. He stole a lot of bases in the minor leagues.
Yeah, right. And he had 37. He came close to a 40-40 season in 2019, but this is extreme even for him.
In the American League, the best team appears to be the Baltimore Orioles, which is kind of a hard sentence to imagine saying based on their recent performances. But this has been a steady and well-orchestrated construction of this roster. This doesn't feel fluky anymore.
No, it's been fun to see this come together. Obviously, it was extremely unfun along the way because they tanked hard to get to this point. They did the Astros rebuild, and it was led by some of the same people who orchestrated the Astros rebuild. So they ran it back. They did the same sort of strategy, and it wasn't clear that it would work again because it wasn't new and novel. They weren't the only ones doing this. It wasn't clear that you could still tank and come out the other side as a really strong team. And yet they have, which is a testament both to how hard they tanked and also the quality of their scouting and drafting and player development. It's just every other week this season, they've brought up some highly touted prospect, many of whom look very similar. And so that's been kind of a meme, just being unable to tell the top Orioles prospects apart. But especially the position players, not even all of them are up yet. They still have the best prospect in baseball, Jackson Holliday, who's at AAA, as well as Kobe Mayo, another great prospect. So they have too many talented young players for the number of positions that they have. And so there's been a question all along of, will they spend? Will that ownership group actually support the front office? Will the front office be willing to trade some prospects to get better? They didn't do a whole lot at the deadline, but here they are on the verge of 100 wins and clinching the AL East. And it's just been so much fun to see this come together with this group of young guys they've got.
Yeah, I mean, two of the best players are Adley Rutschman, the catcher, who was the number 1 pick in 2019, and Gunnar Henderson, who was a second-round pick in 2021. I did not know that Adley Rutschman also kicked at Oregon State and kicked a 63-yard field goal.
Oh, wow. Stefan Fatsis' hero.
Did not know that.
How could you not know that?
I don't know. I couldn't know that. I mean, the interesting thing to me, or an interesting thing to me about the Orioles, is that this is an ownership and a front office that has not been sort of supported by the fan base, not sort of recognized or respected in a lot of ways. There's a lot of dislike among people in baseball and fans toward this team, which has, on the field, been absolutely likable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's saying something that John Angelos is one of the least likable owners in the game, because he has some stiff competition there. But every time he has opened his mouth this season, it's to say something that has made everyone angry or groan. He's just the prototypical fail son, essentially, at this point in Major League Baseball. But the team itself on the field is doing what it can to make up for that. So the front office has been sort of spendthrift. I mean, that's been their MO, is just let's hoard our prospects and let's have them come along and let's not spend a whole lot. And obviously part of that is ownership too. And it's hard to apportion blame there when it comes to why isn't their payroll higher? Why haven't they supported this great core that they have by adding even more talent? But as it is, they're just so good. I mean, they could still use some pitching help, certainly, and one of the stories of the offseason will be, will they look to upgrade? Will they trade from their great depth and strength of prospects here to try to round out their roster a little more? But they have fully arrived. I mean, they went from terrible team, historically awful, to last year, sneaky, surprising contender. We're in the race right up until the end. And this year, they're just maybe the best team in the league. So it happened pretty quickly when it happened.
Shohei Ohtani was shut down for the remainder of the season. He has a torn ulnar collateral ligament and then had another injury, which stopped him from hitting in addition to pitching. So surgery, free agency. How do you forecast the future for Shohei Ohtani in baseball now?
Yeah, it's a sad ending to what will regardless be an MVP season for Ohtani, despite the fact that he will have not played almost at all in September. He's just been so far ahead of everyone else. We were sort of robbed of the opportunity to see him have a truly historic all-time great year, but it was even despite the injuries that curtailed it. So as it is, this would be his second UCL surgery. Now, it's not clear exactly what sort of surgery he had. His agent and doctor were vague about that, but it seems like it's this new variant, this alternative to Tommy John, an internal brace repair, which is not swapping out the ligament, but just sort of stabilizing it and allowing it to heal, which you can come back from more quickly than the full-blown TJ, especially a second one. But even so, he's going to be limited to DHing next year. He's not going to pitch until 2025, but he still fully intends to be a two-way player at that point. Obviously, he was going to completely break the bank this winter. If he had finished the season strong and healthy, people were talking about $600 million contracts, which would have been wild considering that Mike Trout is still the greatest contract ever in baseball at $426, or Aaron Judge at $360 for a free agent. So Ohtani is almost certainly going to break those records. Even so, it's a weak free agent class. There's not a lot of offensive talent out there, and he still can hit even while he's rehabbing from this injury. And although the fact that this is a second injury for him makes the odds a little lower that he'll be able to come back at full strength and be a two-way guy again, even if he doesn't, there are fallback plans. He could be a reliever part-time. He could just be an outfielder, right? He could be probably a plus everyday defensive outfielder while being one of the best hitters in baseball. He wouldn't actually be that much less valuable than he is right now, even though it would be a little less sensational. So he's still going to make an enormous amount of money if he wants to maximize the years and dollars here. We're still looking at probably something in the $400 to $500 million range.
Yeah, he's 29 years old. Long contracts worth a lot of money have been given to players who are older than Shohei Ohtani.
Yes.
He hit 44 home runs this year, pitched 132 innings, struck out 167 batters. His slash line was 304, 412, 654, which is insane. I mean, the 304, especially in an era where, 10 players batted above 300 this year across baseball, 12. So the money seems sort of for a foregone conclusion to me that it's going to be in the 400 to 500, because why shouldn't it? The one thing I think Ohtani really did this year was establish himself, not that he wasn't already a household name, but as a popular figure. Like everybody knows now that not only is he an amazing unicorn two-way baseball player, but they have seen more of him.
Right.
That's got to have some appeal to New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, whoever is going to sign him.
And wherever he goes, it's going to be an ownership level decision, right? So you never know how it's going to go down when the owner gets involved and they just decide, I want to splurge. I want to be the owner who employs Shohei Ohtani. But that is definitely something that teams are factoring into their estimates and projections. The fact that he just brings in so much extra revenue, whether it's sponsorship deals or the fact that everyone in Japan is going to be watching every one of your games when he's healthy. And just the fact that he does sell tickets, especially when he pitches. Granted, as long as he's not a two-way player, he might be a little less sensational and ticket selling than he has been when he's fully operational. But assuming he gets back to that point, he has transcended the sport in a way that very few, if any, players do these days.
All right, finally, my favorite story of the last couple of weeks has been Blue Jays starter Yusei Kikuchi mentioning that he sleeps 13 or 14 hours a night. I mean, athletes need to sleep, but this has just been hilarious. Maybe it's partly because Kikuchi is Japanese. He speaks through an interpreter. His teammates have run with this, but this has been a great little story.
Yeah, in his defense, I don't know if it's defense, a lot of people are envious of him, I think, but he says he only sleeps 13 to 14 the night before he pitches. Other nights, he's okay getting only 8 to 10, which I think that is in some ways more extraordinary. The fact that he is able to just will himself to sleep several more hours every 5 or 6 nights. I mean, just getting 8 to 10 minimum as your baseline, that's impressive enough. But just being able to dial it up to 13 to 14 at will. And it sounds like, I mean, we're all perplexed by this. Everyone wanted to know more immediately when this quote first surfaced. He seems entirely blasé about it. He seems flummoxed that everyone else is so flummoxed by this. Right. He's like, I just close my eyes and I can go to sleep. Isn't
and
that how it's supposed to work?
Apparently he can sleep everywhere, like buses, planes, locker room, with blaring music.
Right. And he's not the only athlete who takes recovery and sleep hygiene very seriously. Of course, athletes are all tracking their nutrition and their quality of sleep these days. And we've heard guys like LeBron and Roger Federer talk about wanting to get 12 hours. Ohtani himself has talked about how sleep is a top priority for him, and Justin Verlander as he's gotten older. But this is, I think, extreme. So a lot of people have been perplexed, worried, or just jealous, I think, of the fact that...
Oh, I'm totally envious of Yusei Kikuchi.
Yeah. And, he said that it's good for him to sleep a lot because it makes him less anxious. If he's awake, he's stressing about his upcoming start. So he just goes into standby mode. He just deactivates.
And the way this came about and became public knowledge was great, too, because... Kikuchi sort of blamed his early exit in a win against the Yankees to a muscle cramp because of a poor night's sleep. And he said that he only got 11 hours versus the normal 13 or 14 before
We've all been there. Yeah.
My left trapezius always acts up. If I don't get 13 hours of sleep. Ben Lindbergh, senior editor at The Ringer. co-host of Effectively Wild, co-author of The Only Rule Is It Has to Work and The MVP Machine, which you should buy and read. Ben, thank you as always for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure. Enjoy the playoffs.
In our next segment, we'll talk to Nadira Goffe of Slate and Dan McQuade of Defector about, well, mostly Taylor Swift, but also a documentary about the Philadelphia Eagles center, Jason Kelce. This next segment was supposed to be exclusively about a new Amazon Prime documentary about thoughtful, down-to-earth, hardworking Eagles center and Philly icon Jason Kelce, and we will discuss it with two native Philadelphians who are invited here for their expertise. They are Nadira Goffe, who's a culture writer at Slate. Hey, Nadira.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And Dan McQuade, the visual editor at Defector. What's up, Dan?
Hey, thank you for having me. I can say, Wooder here if you need some Philly accents on the pod.
You can do whatever John you want, guys. The news cycle, however, demands that we start with Jason Kelce's doofus glamour boy brother Travis, the Kansas City Chiefs star tight end, now one of the most famous people in America because Taylor Swift accepted his invitation to the Chiefs' 41-10 win over the Chicago Bears on Sunday. Tay-Tay watched the game from an Arrowhead Stadium luxury box with the Kelce brothers' mom, Donna. Swift wore a Chiefs windbreaker, screamed, "Let's fucking go," after Kelce caught a touchdown pass from Patrick Mahomes, and helped clean up after the game. Footage shot by, I kid you not, Walter Payton's son, who's a sports anchor for a Chicago TV station, captured the two of them walking out of the stadium. Let's listen to this future Emmy Award-winning reporting.
Hey,
how you doing?
Yes, that was Taylor Swift saying, hey. That is so exciting. Side by side, but no PDA, TMZ reported. Kelce wore a cream and sky blue denim jacket and pants ensemble by fashion Kid 321. Kelce wore a cream and sky blue denim jacket and pants ensemble by the fashion brand Kid Super, titled 1989 Bedroom Painting, which I read online may have been renamed on Sunday to cash in on Swift's re-release of her 2014 album, 1989. They left the stadium in what was described as Kelce's vintage convertible. Nadira, you said before the show that you could talk about Tay-Tay and Travis for hours. I'm giving us 5 minutes. Travis Kelce started this whole thing, and he's going to get eaten alive, right?
Okay, first of all, I did not know that potentially Kid Super renamed some of their clothing to 1989. That's hilarious.
Breaking news.
I mean, actual breaking news. I don't think that Travis will get eaten alive, in the sense that I'm unsure how real all of this is, because I think it's very beneficial for both of them publicity-wise. So Taylor, listen, her status as an Eagles fan is about the one thing I can no longer hold against her, the one thing I don't hold against her, because I was born in the old school era of Disney Channel beef, where she had some serious feuds with some of my favorite celebrities. And so therefore, her and I were cool, but we're not on the best of terms, obviously hypothetically. But the one thing I do love about her is that she's an Eagles fan. And I think in her sort of dating history past, her public past, right? She's known for dating a specific type of skinny, curly-haired, white male that's sort of at the height of their game, whether it be acting or singing or whatever, but very much gives off childish energy, or at least in the way that she recounts their relationships, gives off very childish energy. Some of them were actually children because she was a child, right? 18 or whatever. And then some of them are Jake Gyllenhaal treating her like trash, right? So I do think that this is a step forward for her, especially with her whole previous situation with Matty Healy, who was the lead singer of the 1975, and they were linked together, and then he was canceled for some unearthed podcast episodes in which he said some really horrible things. Coming off of that, to date someone who actually seems like the first man she's ever dated publicly, not a boy, but a man, right? Capital M, man. I think it's very, very smart for her.
Well, and connecting with the NFL is no stupid move either, right, Dan?
I do think it's very interesting when there's a relationship like this, because obviously, plenty of football fans are also Taylor Swift fans. And are Taylor Swift fans that much different than football fans? they've both been going to football stadiums in their costumes in recent times. Like, football fans don't exchange friendship bracelets.
But maybe they should.
Maybe they should.
Maybe they should.
Yeah, like, but they exchange like beer in the parking lot before the game, as I'm sure Taylor Swift fans do too. But I think what's cool about when there's like an athlete-musician relationship is that, you know, both of these people are very famous. Taylor Swift is obviously a huge musician, and I do think like the furor over this is really showing how big of a pop star she really is. And like Travis Kelce has won 2 Super Bowls recently because he and his brother were in the Super Bowl last year. He's in a bunch of commercials. I feel like that's how like football players really get famous, since they wear helmets on the field. Mm-hmm. There isn't much of a crossover in the celebrity coverage world of athletes and like artists, right?
The NBA does a pretty good job of crossing over.
Yeah, I mean, but I just feel like, you know, like when there's a sports and, you know, musician or actor or artist relationship, sometimes it's kind of memorable. Like, I still think of Jason Sehorn and Angie Harmon, the Giants cornerback and the star of Baywatch Nights, on, you know, dating in the 90s, you know, Sierra and Russell Wilson, obviously David and Victoria Beckham, sort of the goats of this recent celebrity.
Frank
artist.
Gifford and Kathy Lee Crosby.
Frank Gifford and Kathy Lee, Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe.
How much farther back do we need to go?
Yeah.
Babe Ruth dated some like can dancers, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun, right? It's fun seeing Taylor sort of get back in her Americana bag and momentarily, one hopes, trade in her Eagles hoodie for a Chiefs windbreaker and scream, "Let's fucking go," and like get excited right next to Donna Kelce, right? It's funny, but it's also fun. And it's nice to see her sort of in this role where I feel like in the past she has dated a lot of guys who like have this air of being smart or smarter than her, right? Like here she is singing her pop songs, and then she's like dating all these guys who like think they're smarter than her or something, right? Like that's sort of the air they give off. And this is the complete opposite. And I love that for her.
Oh, the power dynamic here is all Tay-Tay, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. I mean, I thought that Travis Kelce in that 6-second shot on Instagram of them walking out of the stadium looked terrified. There was total like deer in the headlights. He doesn't know what he's getting into here look on his face. And that may be wrong. He's a pretty self-possessed guy with the media. He is very good at working the media. He and his brother both clearly want to have some sort of football media sort of, you know, Manning brothers type situation when they retire. But this feels like, whoa, like, dude, you might be out of your league here. But let us now transition to this new documentary, Kelce. I want to play a clip from near the end of it where Jason Kelce talks seemingly extemporaneously right after losing last year's Super Bowl to the Chiefs about the city where he has played his entire NFL career. Let's listen.
You know, again, I think that, you know, we gave it everything we had and just came up a little bit short. I really do think that, like, this team represents Philadelphia, and, you know, this whole thing, it's a Philly thing. It's like the whole mantra of, like, the postseason, having the courage to, you know, fight for who you are and embrace, you know, your strengths and believe in yourself and be happy with who you are and how you're different. Being unapologetically yourself until the whole world has to accept how great you are. Like, that's a Philly thing, man.
Nadira, you reviewed the documentary in Slate, and you wrote in Slate that as a proud Philly native, the film takes home the prize as the most Philly sports movie ever. What made it so Philly for you? And I think Jason Kelce sort of encapsulates that, and he is not a Philly guy by birth.
No, yeah, and I think that's sort of the surprising thing about him. And I think, you know, this documentary does a lot of things. First, I think it was gifted with one of the most sort of fortunate documentary endings ever, which is when they set out to make this documentary, I'm pretty sure they knew it was like Kelce's last season. They probably didn't think much of it, but then lo and behold, the Eagles go on a winning streak, they win the playoffs, they enter the Super Bowl, and then it becomes this historic Super Bowl where two brothers are facing off for the first time in history, right? And so I think this documentary was sort of given just a lucky gift in terms of the way that the events played out. But I think what it is mostly, for 75% of it, it's a depiction of a specific beloved athlete going through common athletic problems, right? We have the beloved Jason Kelce, but he's wondering the same questions that plenty of other athletes have wondered. Is football worth it? You know, he's had at least 7 surgeries. He fears CTE. He has a body that can neither play without anti-inflammatories or exist peacefully just in the off season without pain. He has a third young daughter who was born only a few weeks after the Super Bowl. And so, you know, there's a lot that he's sacrificing. And I think that in the way it depicts him dealing with those things, what it's trying to posit is that his ascendancy to Philly royalty was some sort of kismet, right? Because he embodies a lot of the characterization that Philly natives feel is inherent to the city or inherent to being a Philadelphian. He's an underdog. He was a walk on his college team and a 6th-round draft pick. He's loyal. You know, he's only played for the Eagles, and he's played for the Eagles for 13 seasons. He has sacrificed, and he's shown grit and perseverance and working himself to the bone. And I think that quote about being unapologetically yourself until the whole world has to accept how great you are is really a Philly thing. And I think he's someone who gets what Philly is about, not only because his career and his past has embodied it, but also because he sort of indoctrinated himself into the culture. He married a local girl who's a diehard Eagles fan. He wore the Mummers costume and gave that sort of really lasting speech at the Super Bowl parade. He made the Christmas album with the Eagles where, you know, he said, "Fuck you to Dallas." Like, these are things that are very sort of inherent in how Philly fans think and act. And I think another sort of gift to that adds an extra layer to that, what makes it the most Philly sports movie to me in a city that's full of them, right? Because every sports movie loves an underdog story and a story about grit and perseverance, and that's just what the city's about. But not many of them showcase a key component to the Philly sports fan experience, which is losing. You know, Philly, we're not a city of losers, but we're a city of really hopeful people, even though we experience loss quite often.
Well, I'm gonna push back on that part of it. And the thing that this is not about the documentary so much, Dan, but it is about the trope of Philly as this underdog city that has emerged, oddly intensified since, you know, the Eagles won the Super Bowl, which seems weird, that it's kind of BS. Like, let's be clear. Philadelphia's had plenty of success in sports. You grew up there, Dan. You know this to be true. In your lifetime, you have seen World Series and Super Bowls, maybe not NBA or NHL championships, but college basketball championships, etc. This feels like a tired trope. And the film, to its credit, doesn't really exploit that trope, I thought, though it does allow Kelce to be sort of emblematic of it in a fair way, I thought.
One thing I found interesting while preparing for this podcast, I watched a bit of this 2005 documentary called EAGLES, the movie. And it's sort of just like a recap of the Super Bowl season with McNabb and T.O. that also like talks to fans and goes to tailgates like sort of throughout the season. And, you know, like one of the first things in the documentary is they interview some local like psychologists or something who are like, Philadelphia has this inferiority complex. And I feel like you used to hear that like a whole lot. And I don't know if you hear it as much anymore because people have shifted to this underdog thing, which I at least think is like way more of a positive portrayal of Philadelphia than this inferiority complex, which I do think people here have. No one is more annoyed by Philadelphia fans than me, I feel like, as both a fan and a sports writer. You know, I did a story once for somewhere about like where I found every single team in the NFL's fans being referred to as blue collar, which to me makes it like a worthless descriptor if it can describe like any team's fans. I do think that, I don't know for sure, but I do think that there's a lot of other, football teams fans that are, that act similar to Philly fans. But I do also think that is, probably why Jason Kelce works so well here. He talked to us, the Inquirer, for a Matt Breen story a couple years ago. And one of the quotes Kelce said was, Philly might not want to hear this, but I do think there's a lot of similarities between Philadelphia and Cleveland. And as much as it pains me to hear that as well, Philly has a much better downtown. People live there. But I do think that obviously that's true. They're like American cities not too far from each other. They both have like hollowed out manufacturing cores, And so I do think that Kelce is good at pandering to fans, right? He dresses in the Mummers costume. He goes down to Sea Isle City and hangs at Ocean Drive, the bar there. But I do think he also has a really nice way of caring about what he's doing, right? Like before he put on the Mummers costume, he talked to some people and was like, what can I do that will be funny, that will work with me having drank nonstop for 5 days after winning the Super Bowl? And I do think people do and should appreciate that. And, he's in a lucky situation, right? Like he's an awesome player, but he's also the center. When he screws up, like people aren't going to see it as much as when a wide receiver drops a pass or a quarterback, fumbles. But I do think that he's like leaned into the Philly thing in a very enjoyable way. Even if people sort of go, I'm a little tired of some of the performative Philadelphia Delco,
Delaware County, for listeners who are not from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So it's a Philly thing.
It's my least favorite slogan that we've ever had.
Some marketing team approached the Eagles before the playoffs and were like, hey, we have this whole plan for what you should do. And the Eagles were like, oh no, we're just going to go with this It's a Philly thing. And it seems like they should go with the marketing plan, but it worked. It worked so well. You see it everywhere now.
Everywhere.
Jalen Hurts did say it, so there was some good sourcing there for it.
Yeah, I think the thing about losing again is that it allows Jason Kelce in the documentary to sort of get away from the usual platitudes, I guess, about what being a Philly sports fan is. And so instead of saying, like, just it's a Philly thing over and over again, what he says is that he likens football to being about fighting, fighting to win a rep in the gym or fighting for a play on the field and fighting for your worth, which he says is really hard to do, but it keeps you alive. And I think that, to me, is like the actual true Philly motto. Is like, we're not always the city of brotherly love, but we are the city that fights for our worth, battling every day to stay alive, right? And that's also, I take it kind of seriously, like that we're one of the poorest major U.S. cities, with a shocking percentage of people living in deep poverty that's 50% below the poverty line. We have a really very dangerous sort of state of emergency with gun violence and homicide that no one ever really wants to talk about. We have a fraught history with policing. We are a U.S. city that dropped a bomb on itself. And we've had a ton of experience with leadership instability. And it's not that we're the only U.S. city that experiences these things, but I do think that we have a sort of unique experience when it comes to hardship, when it comes to a lack of luck as a city. And yet, we're still here. We're still the same people. We still unite over a whole bunch of gruff men throwing a ball and running into each other at full speed. Like, I think that it actually is kind of something real. And I think that he points it out in a way that is really just succinct and very good. And he's good at that. Like, he's good at getting to the heart of what not only Philly people want to hear, but the truth of it. And I think that's one of the reasons why we love him. And I think that's one of the reasons why the documentary works so well.
The documentary is called Kelce. It is on Amazon Prime. Nadira Goffe is a culture writer for Slate. Nadira, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Dan McQuade, visual editor at Defector. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks so much.
They will be back for Slate Plus members in our bonus segment, so please sign up for Slate Plus and stick around for that. No afterballs today, so that is our show. Our producer this week, filling in for Kevin Bendis, was Jared Downing. To listen to past shows and subscribe or just reach out, go to slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the show and to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. I'm Stefan Fatsis. Remember Zelmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs. Vic said something.
Music. Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.